Mother-in-laws. Some can be great, respectful, and an enjoyable addition to a family unit. Some, however, can literally be the epitome of evil, as you will discover in this case. The crime of Fula and Castro in Jarakopu in 1931 was not an ordinary crime. It had all those elements that ultimately made it into a song, as strange as that sounds. The beauty of Fula, the daughter, the passion and ferocity of the mother, Castro, and the peculiar character of the victim, Athanasopoulos, compose an unprecedented tragedy that marked pre-war Greece. The protagonists are no more. The song stopped playing, but even today, the murder and dismemberment of the body of the contractor husband by his wife, mother-in-law, maid, and nephew of the mother-in-law is considered a crime with a fictional history. Then, and for many years, until other even more chilling stories came to light, it was considered the crime of the century. It is typical that when the famous trial took place, the Athenians were so interested in watching the proceedings that they arrived at the criminal court to take a seat, equipped with VIP tickets, which they used to get priority. Another element is that the woman, mother and daughter, were released from prison in 1941 during the occupation when the Tsolaglu government signed a decree on decongesting prisons without disturbing the social interest. No one bothered then. Hunger, occupation, deaths and slavery, the shocking events of the time, distracted the public from the crime and the perpetrators. The nephew, Moskios, had already died in prison. Castro died in 1956, and the maid, Yanula Belu, started a family, and Fula, who was only 33 years old when she got out of prison, got married and even became an exemplary wife. Artemis Castro, a woman of great intelligence and a strong personality, liberated, changed lovers like shirts. Divorced from Panayotis Castro and without money, she arrived in Athens with her daughter Fula. The girl had a lovely face and blue eyes. She seduced men, and she was a constant temptation to the local male inhabitants. They arrived from Kefalonia to Athens and stayed first in a hotel and then in a house run by a lover of Castro's, an unmarried colonel. The colonel sends groceries and flowers to the two women every day. The sergeant who transports them is Dimitris Athanasopoulos, who falls in love with Fula. Thus begins their fateful relationship. Athanasopoulos is 25 years old and Fula is 12 at the time. He loves her truly and madly. Fula's father had immigrated to Canada. He was well off economically, and he answers his ex-wife's despairing letters and starts sending money. Artemis leaves the colonel, and the women begin to live a life of luxury and money. When Fula turns 16, she continues to secretly see Athanasopoulos, while her mother insists on leaving him. Mother and daughter develop a competitive relationship around the person of Athanasopoulos. In the narrative of his book, Tassos Kodoyanidis also described a scene in which Fula finds Athanasopoulos in her mother's bedroom. The couple break up, but they will meet again after a while and start dating again. They get married in secret and basically start a new life that is far from ideal. It is a life burdened from the start. Fula, dependent on Castro, cannot be separated from her mother, who lives with them in the same house. Castro and Athanasopoulos hate each other. They manifest it in every way. Their home is never quiet, with arguments frequent. Athanasopoulos becomes a contractor. He makes a lot of money and starts his own company. He has 3 children with Fula, but starts to return home late at night. At some point, he starts not coming home at all. At the trial, no witness from the defense or the civil action considered him a virtuous family man. For Castro, it is the big chance to get rid of him, and she begins to plot his demise. She hires Yanula Belu as a domestic helper, a faithful person as well, who will play a role in the future crime. Athanasopoulos lived a secluded life. He goes out with other women, is addicted to aphrodisiacs, but visits the house in Korokopu, sometimes to sleep, sometimes to see his children. He never manages to get Fula to move away from the family home and her mother. Castro had lent him money for his investments, and every time she realized that something like this could happen, she set traps and caused fights for the couple, sowing discord between them. In the midst of one of the fights that break out, he beats Castro, who swears that she will take revenge on him. On January the 5th, 1931, Athanasopoulos had fun with women in Phaleros whorehouses and knocks on the door of Fula's house in the middle of the night. The couple quarrels and Athanasopoulos falls asleep drunk. That same night, an earthquake shakes the house. At home, everyone wakes up. Castro, Fula, the host nephew Moskios, and the maid. Athanasopoulos doesn't wake up until the morning, around 7 a.m. He asks Fula to make love. She refuses, and he almost rapes her. Fula flings herself out of the room in a rage, half naked. She asks her mother for help. The evil mother-in-law, as upset about her daughter's condition, decided to take action. She convinced her nephew, Dimitris Moskios, to shoot Athanasopoulos in his bed. Castro had no trouble convincing him to take part in the crime. Moskios was one of the many fans of Fula and had serious psychological problems. After making sure that Athanasopoulos was dead, they decided to burn his body to destroy the incriminating evidence. So they did with the help of the maid Yanula Belu. Except they didn't count on the terrible smell of burning flesh. They were afraid that the neighbors would hear about them and stopped, so they chose to dismember the body and throw it piece by piece into the stream of Ilissos. They put the limbs in large sacks and enlisted the help of the lover of Fula's mother, Spiros Maroulopoulos. He gave them to jailer Yorgos Kornarakis to throw them away. Luck, however, was not on their side. Where the sacks were dumped, the stream was shallow, causing them to climb into the bed. The packages containing the dismembered body were discovered by a child the next day. Police searched the house from top to bottom and arrested the family. The trial began in February 1932. All of Athens watched the sensational drama. All the criminologists, journalists, and secular Athens rushed to be in the audience. The trial lasted 40 days, and when dealing with the abnormalities and sexual behavior of the victim, Castro maintained in her apology, which was made amid many rebutals, that she saved her daughter from torture, and that all the responsibility is hers. The court sentenced Castro and Fula to death, and the domestic helper Belu to life. Dimitris Moskios was sentenced to 20 years. All investigations and testimony at the hearing concluded that Fula had no involvement in the heinous crime. They said then that Fula was condemned for her beauty. The shocking story was made into a song by Iakovos Montanaris and was played in centres, cafes and squares. The song released is estimated to have sold 90,000 records. The beauty of Fula was a catalyst. With her charms, she bewitched the director of the prisons and her life became comfortable. The same was true for her mother. Eventually, the death sentence was commuted to 10 years in prison, and in 1941, mother and daughter were free again. Fula married well for a second time. The second marriage was to a colonel and lasted until the end of her life in 1971. The rest of the family did not have such a happy ending. Her mother died in 1956, and Dimitris Moskios was admitted to a psychological ward where he died shortly after. Although Fula was a victim of domestic violence, the society disliked her, as the crime was tough and brutal and caused a real shock throughout society.